2024 started off kind of slow on the Hoosie, but it produced some really good fish as the month wore on. The big fish run that January had closed with continued right through early February. The 35-inch plus overslots got tougher to find as the end of February approached. As expected, striper fishing got tougher in March, but we still managed a few decent ones. April was a bit better, at least the air temperatures were starting to creep up. I decided to check out the freshwater action. My first sweetwater trip of the year was tough, but things got a lot better on my next largemouth bass outing. That was fun, but when the herons start lining the banks of the tidal rivers, you know the alewives and herring have arrived, and jerkbait and topwater season is knocking on the door. In May, you'll find the big girls chasing big bait in the river, so fish accordingly. My freshwater roots pulled me to Candlewood for a day on the Sweetwater. But it was back to the Hoosie a couple days later, and the remainder of May was a big fish festival on top. Starting off June catching largemouth and smallies at Lilanona, but the stripers were still calling me to the mouth of the Hoosie and nearby waters in Long Island Sound for the tail end of the spring run. When the striper action was off, I busied myself with bottom fishing for porgies. Then I fished Candlewood for freshwater bass to close out the month. July started with an uneventful trip to the Sound, and I put the saltwater gear down and fished largemouth and smallmouth all over western Connecticut for a couple of weeks before closing out the month on Long Island Sound. My last July outing, I had a ball fishing the salt with light freshwater gear and soft plastics designed for largemouth and smallmouth. Freshwater bass were again the target as August rolled in, and the fishing was great. I was fishing in the northwest corner of the state on the 18th when the worst summer weather event in my memory hit the state. As the storm was coming ashore in the late morning, the fish where I was went on a mind-blowing feed. It didn't seem to matter where I cast or what I threw. I caught one just about every cast for nearly 2 hours. The ride home, normally just over an hour, took more than 7 hours. I was on the water, out in the salt, a week or so later. When September rolled around, I was back to my favorite northwestern Connecticut waters, catching largemouth. I did manage to get out on the salt for a day before heading to Vermont for my annual Champlain trip with my son. We spent the first day running around the lower riverine section of the lake and did okay, but not really Champlain okay. The next day was going to be short and sweet as it turned out. We caught mostly smallmouth from one small section of the lake for just about the entire time we were out, almost all by fishing the top with unweighted sluggos and finesse fish. Back home, I finished out the month fishing the mouth of the Hoosie for stripers and some nearby rocky areas out in the Sound for black sea bass. October started with open water stripers out in the Sound. When that got tough in the middle of the month, I fished mostly inland and found freshwater bass very cooperative. Finally, I spent the last week or so of the month chasing what I assumed were the first stripers of the fall moving into the Hoosier for the winter. After a couple very tough excursions, I switched back to freshwater. I even hit Zoar for a bunch of big crappie during that lull in striper activity. And the stripey guys finally showed up again right after Thanksgiving. It was more than a week into December before the stripers started filtering into and up the Hoosier for the winter. The action slowly got better as the water temperatures dropped into and through the 40s, but it wasn't really hot and heavy until after Christmas.